What did your friend do that accidentally turned you on? Story 1. I was off from college for about a week. I came back and a friend of mine who I hung out with every day ran up and hugged me. But as she hugged me, she jumped and wrapped her legs around me, and we were just looking at each other. Should have just went for it, but alas, I only realized after the fact months later. If I could go back in time, I'd punch myself in the balls. Story 2. We were sitting on her couch watching Thor Ragnarok, finished our Chinese food. She got a pint of Ben and Jerry's out of her freezer, and she sat sideways half on my lap and took turns taking a bite and feeding me a bite. It was oddly intimate, but she'd made it clear she was convinced if we started to date we'd end up married, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. 6 months later we were dating. 6 months after that we were married, coming up on our 2-year anniversary. Story 3. I had a friend lick my face as a joke because she was one of those girls that thought they were quirky or different for acting like a weirdo or something. It was like freshman year of high school IRC. It was definitely strange as hell, but Jesus Christ, did she awaken something in me. I wasn't even particularly attracted to her. I was just licked and I felt the arousal creeping in, and I'm standing there like, please no. Story 4. This was 5 years back in high school. A female friend and I were put in a group together for a science project. We met up after school at her place, because no one was home and she didn't want to drive over to my place. As I was sitting on my laptop and reading, she scratched my forearm with her nails to get my attention. Man, her look in her eyes and the scratches. I still remember that. Story 5. We were both drunk at a friend's house party, and I playfully pulled her hair to get her attention. She gasped, and then gave a happy little moan. What made it hotter was the way she gripped the seat of her chair with both hands, and encouraged me to do it again, and so I ended up playing with her hair all night. I still think about her gorgeous bliss-filled face, though sadly we never took it any further. Story 6. Probably wasn't accidental, but I was drinking with a friend of mine one night, and she was bitching about her boyfriend at the time. I had always been interested in her, but I also respected it when she got into relationships, even though I really didn't like this guy she was with. She said she was gonna go to bed and that I could crash on the couch since I had been drinking. She started stretching in front of me and said that she always stretches before bed. Now I wouldn't have questioned this, but she was sticking her ass right in my face, and she was getting into some pretty suggestive poses on the floor. She went to bed and the next day thanked me for letting her vent. A lot of people told me she was trying to F and I should have went for it, but she had been drinking and had a boyfriend, so there were 2 red flags for me to not even try. Story 7. He still does this. He takes my shopping bags and puts his hand on my back as we cross streets. I'm short and I have a limp, and he's so kind and caring about it. I asked him out 3 times now, about 2 years apart each time. I was very politely rejected. We are great friends, and I'm happy with that. He's a joy to have in my life. The limp is from a very serious injury I had a few years back. I'm not actually a grandma. But I do love tea and crochet, so make of that what you will. I'm not abnormally short, I'm just regular, can't reach the top shelf and my feet don't touch the floor from chairs short. He's worried jackasses and giant pickups won't see me. He's not wrong. I've had a lot of near misses. Story 8. We were neighbors. She just kicked out her ex-BF, and we lost power due to an ice storm. The power was restored later, but her heat wasn't working right. She called it in, but the maintenance people were busy with calls to fix heat in other units too. We were hanging out at my place watching movies and basking in my heat, though it was still chilly. So we were sharing a blanket on the couch, snuggled up together, and drinking whiskey. She passed out on the couch, so I put on an extra blanket on her and went to my room. About 1 hour later, she walks into my room and just falls into bed next to me, gets under the covers, snuggles up to me, then says, "I'm cold," and passes out. I dunno, maybe I felt wanted and that she came to me for comfort. We didn't hook up or anything. The next morning she woke up, and she made me breakfast, and went back to her apartment to get her heat fixed. Story 9. Friend and I were watching a movie down in his parents' basement back in high school. It was a little chilly and we were kinda playfully fighting over the throw blanket. It turned into a bit of a tickle fight, but I was winning because I am not ticklish except for a few extremely sensitive places, whereas he was ticklish everywhere. He told me it wasn't fair that he couldn't tickle me since my only ticklish spots are the sides of my breasts and back of knees. I dared him to try it, thinking he never would as he was a good Christian boy. He absolutely went for it, and tickled me unmercifully for about a minute until it morphed into complete and total desire. He could absolutely tell the second it changed, and we ended up making out. I absolutely would have F him then and there, but we never went any farther. We never had a repeat of the makeout session, but there was always a huge amount of tension between us after that, and it really kind of ruined the friendship. Story 10. We were going to a picnic with our classmates. This was in 10th grade. I'm doing second year of college now, and we were in this deluxe gigantic bus. We actually played hide and seek in the bus. Anyways. So while we were playing, I crossed my legs and sat down under one of the seats. And a female friend of mine came to the same spot and asked if she could hide with me. I agreed and she lied down and placed her head on my lap. But her head was exactly on my pee. It kinda turned me on, but I was trying really hard not to have a hard-on and creep her out. Luckily, my efforts were not in vain. I still keep in touch with her and actually mentioned this to her a few months before COVID hit. She admitted that she knew she was on my pee, but didn't want to move because she thought that would make me feel awkward. We had a good chuckle and we're still good friends. Story 11. A friend of mine used to sit on my lap when we'd run out of chair hanging with other friends, and she'd move her hips to find a comfy spot, but goddamn it was hard on me, to find a way that my little John wouldn't poke her in the butt. Which did happen a couple times, which would be followed by her giving me this smile and shifting just a little more and saying something coy. Another time was when we were hanging out while I had a really loose tooth. She was getting annoyed at me pushing at it with my tongue, so she pushed me to my bed, straddled me, and reached her head in my mouth to tear my tooth out. From the sounds being made, my groaning, the bed shaking, my dad came up to make sure we were alright, then saw us. Sweaty, her on top of me, face right up to mine, and thought we were about to do it, lol. After she used that as a distraction enough to yank my tooth out, I had to go downstairs to stop up the bleeding and managed to explain to him what had happened, to which he looked mildly disappointed, and I think his headcanon to this day is that I had S with her, or at least some light, over the clothes action. Story 12. Not very subtle, but she spontaneously pulled her pants down to tan her legs while we were chilling outside. When she suggested doing it, I was like, oh sure, assuming she had shorts on underneath. Nope, Victoria's Secret panties. I laughed and said, dude, we're outside. But in truth, God, I was turned the hell on. She wasn't the brightest friend, but that's what made hanging out with her so fun. LMAO, I miss pre-COVID times. Story 13. I was having a drink with an old friend a long time ago. At a point, after a brief pause, she just looked at me, smiled, and said, "You're very handsome, you know." It got a little quiet, awkward, and we carried on drinking and chatting, and soon it was like nothing had happened. But from that moment on, I never failed to notice the striking blue of her eyes, and my feelings became slightly complicated and conflicted. It didn't last, of course, just bizarre how a compliment can change a perception, especially for us men who receive so few. We barely speak anymore. We're both married and she has a son. Of course, I love my wife with all I have and all I am. But there's always that memory. I've never forgotten it, and imagine I never will. Story 14. Not a friend per se, but a random stranger. I was checking out at a drugstore. I gave my phone number for the rewards system, and immediately we started chatting about where we were from. Turns out we grew up about 40 miles or so from each other, and discussed what it's like being so far from home. When she handed me my change back, we held hands for a few seconds too long, and that is probably the closest thing to intimacy I've felt in a very, very long time. Story 15. He and I were watching a movie, when he gave me a hug. While hugging me, he gently ran his hands up and down my back. He didn't mean anything sexual with it. I, on the other hand, have a very sensitive back and was severely turned on by it. The next day he made fun of me for being ticklish. I then admitted to the truth about that. Needless to say, he did it again later. We've been dating for over a year now, getting close to 2. Story 16. A few years ago, me and a friend were goofing around, making flower crowns on a grassy knoll. She decides to roll down said knoll, and as she does, her shirt rides up and I can see the sun reflecting off that little line of hair that goes down from the belly button. I swear time stopped, and all of my blood vessels woke up at once. The sun was shining brighter, the flowers smelled sweeter. It was as if I briefly stepped into a more perfect pocket dimension. It was then I knew I definitely was not straight. Story 17. Former coworker on base, close to 18 years ago, had been trying for an entire year to get in better shape. She had always been pretty but just wasn't happy with what he mirror showed her. A year of swimming, running, and lightweight training later, and holy shit. I was talking to her, and she stretched, arms above her head, and her sweater lifted up to her rib cage, showing all that glorious tummy real estate down to the hip bones. Apologies, ma'am, but I may have had many impure thoughts about said tummy real estate since. Story 18. I'm terrified of being choked, having people touch my neck, etc. after an incident where I was attacked and raped. I thought I would spend my whole life with that being a really serious never ever touch my neck kind of thing. Which it was for several years. Until my best friend, who is this 6 feet 7 inches monstrosity of a human, playfully lent their hand on my neck. Yup, so it turns out I just needed it to be someone I trust, in a non-S setting, to unlock the ability to be turned on via neck being touched. God damn it, brain. South close, but so far.